One of my favorite aspects of having a planner is having a safe space to kind of planner vomit all my thoughts and feelings, especially when my mental health is suffering. Something that I have learned this past year is how to use my cousin to improve my mental health and not contribute to it. And I've been super thankful for that. So there are many shades and layers to mental health, and I can only speak on behalf of my experience and what I've learned along the way. By no means is this the end all be all, and this video doesn't even scratch the surface of mental health. As we begin to approach winter scaries here in the States, I wanted to pass along some tips and practices that have really helped me. Feel free to customize this and change it to best fit your style, but I like to focus on the weekly layouts right here and then the daily layouts back here. Use this to work best. You could just have a plain notebook and use a plain page. Whatever works best for you, do that. But today, for this example, I'm going to be showing you how I implement these practices on these two layouts. Our weeklies are going to be for planning and calling attention to specific habits and behaviors, and then our dailies are going to be where we break down and elaborate on behaviors, elaborating on feelings and or barriers we may be experiencing in our personal lives that may be contributing to our mental health. We don't want to rush into these sections blindly, so before we start, we need to answer 3 questions first. So first question we want to answer for ourselves is, are there any trends or patterns that you have historically noticed that may correlate with your mental health declining or being affected anyway? So for this, you could think seasons of the year, you could think people, jobs, family, etc. So when you think back to times that you have struggled in your life mentally, do you see any patterns with things that come up or affect you most? A lot of the times when my mental health has declined, it is because the season of the year. I joke that I get the winter scaries. I definitely hit bouts of like seasonal depression, things like that. When I'm inside more, I'm not getting as much sunshine or I'm outside as much. My mental health definitely takes a toll. There's certain people or family members that have maybe affected my mental health in the past. After that, we're going to answer question 2, which is, what are 5 to 10 joys in your life? Try to make this list as diversified as possible. If you really enjoy movies, don't write down like 10 movie titles. Try to make this list as broad as you can. So for me, joys in my life are reading fiction, art, my family, my planner, being in the sun, and exercise. For me, these are 6 things that kind of no matter what, these things usually bring me joy in my life. And then the third question we want to answer, which kind of ties into number 2, but what has historically helped you through these tougher periods in life? This may look like question 2, but it could be other things like reaching out for help in other areas. Maybe it's moving, maybe it's cutting off communication from people. A lot of the times for me, it's just riding out the wave of whatever I'm going through, but sometimes that can look different. The reason I ask these questions is because I'm always trying to proactively maintain or improve my mental health. I don't want to wait for really low periods of my life to plan and think about my well-being, so I try to check in with myself with these questions every so often and just keep them in the back of my head. I like to think of these as safeguards that I've created for myself, so when I am coasting through life or I'm in the dumps, I have a good idea of what has and has not worked for me historically. So let's go back to our weekly layouts. I want to refer back to those safeguards and incorporate them into the areas that I think are appropriate. I like to use sticky notes throughout my book. Again, mental health isn't something that's on a set schedule, so I find it more practical to put these safeguards on these sticky notes so we can move them around and change them as needed. For me, the weekly layout is a safe space for me to advocate for myself and my habits. If I know that the winter months are traditionally tough for me, I would use these kind of October, November months to put in some safeguards for myself just in case. So for example, I am going to write on a sticky note to carve out some time for reading and exercise time to make sure that I am prioritizing doing those things that bring me joy more during those winter months that have been hard for me in the past. Set time aside for eating, rest, and exercise. For me, I know that usually after the new year, things get tough for me a little mentally. So I am just going to set this reminder in here for me later. Actually, I might do it 1 week earlier just so I can plan ahead. And I'm just going to put it in there, and I'm going to keep it in there and just leave it. This is just a good reminder for myself. So as we get closer to January and once I start planning ahead for my new year, I can make sure that I am purposely setting time aside. For me, that looks like taking like vacation time or personal time off from work, doing things kind of outside of my normal routine and giving myself more time to do these things than I normally would. I like to use my taskbars on the left side for this too. I know that having a clean home empties some of the mental clutter that comes with winter that I feel. So I'm gonna make sure that during those weeks I spotlight that during my weekly planning. What are some safeguards that I can proactively plan to protect myself from this feeling? And that's gonna look different for everyone. If you're unable to avoid certain barriers, what is going to be the best way for you to get around them? So you're gonna write those down and put them on or before the weeks that you think they might be needed. So I'm gonna write one more, and I'm just gonna say prioritize deep house cleaning. I notice in the winter months when I'm stuck inside more, the house tends to get more dirty. When my house is dirty, my mind just feels a little bit more anxious than normal. So I'm gonna put that maybe like second week of January, just so I can spotlight this when I am doing my tasks on the side. Purpose of this is that if I know ahead of time that winter months are challenging for me, I'm going to use the joys and observations to help support myself and kind of guide myself through it. Painting is not going to solve or avoid my seasonal depression, but if I can recognize this pattern in myself and carve out a plan to make sure I'm prioritizing the things that make my heart warm, it's much easier for me to accept those lower times and to move through them because I've established these support systems for myself. The main objective of this in my planner is just to give me a guide and some insight. And if I don't get the winter scaries this year, then that's great. But if I do, I'll be comforted by the fact that I have some safeguards set up for myself and that I kind of have a game plan to get through it. And even if we get to these months and none of this stuff helps, you know, it's comforting to know that I was at least looking out for myself and there's some sort of guidance through this period. So now we're going to move into the daily section, which is personally my designated safe space to journal, which means that if and when I'm going through these periods, I'm going to make it a priority to come in here and write about what is happening, how I'm feeling about it, and what are my next steps. I never want to just stay stuck if I don't have to. So if I am feeling particularly anxious or sad, when I am writing in my journal entries, every once in a while, I like to check in with myself and just ask myself, what do I want to do next? So what's next? Do I want to actively seek solutions? If I don't want to do that, do I want to just ride the wave and just be patient with myself? And if that doesn't work or I don't want to do that, then do I need to reach out outside help? These are kind of the questions I always want to just keep in the back of my mind when I am journaling, especially about my feelings. Based on what I think is going to be the most effective and or appropriate, I will move on from there. A lot of the times when I am in depressive periods, it's just me riding out the wave and just being patient and gentle with myself. But there have been periods in my life where I should have sought solutions or help and I hadn't. So these are just some nice reminders on, you know, actions that we can take. I try to practice this in my dailies on a regular routine. Usually the issues that I'm complaining about are much smaller, but I like to use this as a space to planner vomit, and once it's out of my system, I kind of just leave it here and do my best not to let it take up any more mental real estate. Something I like to ask myself when I'm stressed is it within my control to change? Yes. If yes, what are my next steps? If not, I give myself 15 to 30 minutes to be upset about it in here and just get it out of my system. And then I just accept that it's out of my control and I just move along. So you definitely want this to be a safe space for yourself to work out those issues or barriers that you're facing, if you open up your planner and every time you open this up, you're feeling anxious or stressed out about it, or this is a space where you feel like you have to uphold a certain level of perfectionism, then this activity or this method probably isn't going to help you, because your planner itself is a cause of stress for you. So make sure that you're just kind of checking in with yourself and you're allowing this to be a safe place for you. To help you kind of remember this, you can put these 3 questions on a sticky note. You can shuffle it around until it comes naturally to you and you no longer need it back here. Not every daily page needs to be used for this. I like to keep a lot of my dailies about the good things happening in my life, but this is a good reminder to make sure that you are proactively looking out for yourself. One more tip that I want to share that's really helped me is sometimes just acceptance during these periods of life and acknowledging that I can't avoid or prevent bad things from happening. The more time I spend fighting my resistance or my struggles, the more time I end up spending unhappy. And instead of fighting myself and thinking that something is wrong with me every winter, I just accept that winter is hard for me, and that's okay. And there's no shame in that. And again, the more I resist it, the harder it is for me to overcome it. And this process is here to help guide me and remind me to accept that there are high and low seasons in my life to overcome. And regardless of what I do, it's important to just pursue and focus on the things that bring me joy and to not lose sight of those. So when we go back to our questions, anytime I've noticed a pattern that has happened historically, I will go in here and put a sticky. So if I notice that there is a certain person that affects my mental health negatively, maybe every Thanksgiving when we go home and visit, I will put one of those sticky notes here or the week before Thanksgiving, just to make sure that I am, proactively protecting my brain and my well-being. I work in higher education, and so usually August is a really stressful month for me because it's the beginning of the school year. So if I know historically August has been pretty tough for me, I'm going to put in some of those safeguards, plan out some time off for myself so I can make sure I'm prioritizing things that bring me joy, and to make sure, that I'm still taking care of me and doing things that make me happy and just prioritizing myself. If there are any specific ways you use your planner for your mental health, I would love to read them below. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next time.